I hit the cold stone floor, the sound of breaking glass cutting through the string quartet, all because I sat in my usual chair. The evening had started with the crisp scent of autumn in the air. I arrived at the country club carrying 3 heavy, floral centerpieces I had arranged myself. They were wild roses and eucalyptus, a gift for my daughter Sarah's engagement dinner. I owned a small bakery and florist shop downtown, and Sarah always loved my arrangements. A waiter took the boxes from me, his eyes lingering a bit too long on my sensible flats and plain cardigan. I wasn't dressed in designer silk like the rest of her fiancé's family. I found the main dining room glowing with candlelight. Sarah looked beautiful in a champagne dress, greeting guests with rehearsed grace. When I walked up, she kissed my cheek carefully, making sure not to smudge her makeup. Her eyes immediately darted away, searching the room for someone more important. That someone was Eleanor David's mother, dripping in pearls, and a condescending smile. When dinner was announced, I walked to the table and took the seat right next to Sarah. It was the same spot I had occupied at every birthday, graduation, and holiday dinner since her father passed away 15 years ago. I smoothed my napkin over my lap, feeling a brief moment of warmth. Then Sarah leaned in. Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Mom, this seat is for my mother-in-law. Get up." I froze, thinking I misheard the music. I looked at her confused. Before I could process the words, Sarah's hand pressed firmly against my shoulder. It wasn't a violent strike, but it was a hard, definitive push. My chair scraped backward against the stone tiles. I lost my balance. My elbow knocked over a crystal water glass, and I tumbled sideways onto the floor. The music stopped. The entire room turned to look. Eleanor stood nearby, covering her mouth in exaggerated horror. Sarah looked down at me, her face pale, but her voice cold. "Mom, please, just go find another spot." I didn't argue. I slowly gathered myself, brushed off my skirt, and walked out of the room. I left the scent of my own roses behind, knowing exactly what I had to do when I got home. The drive back to my house was completely silent. I kept the radio off and the windows rolled down, letting the chill of the night air dry the dampness on my sleeve where the water had spilled. I didn't shed a single tear. Crying was for people who felt helpless, and sitting in the driver's seat of a car I owned, I felt nothing but sharp, clear reality. I walked into my kitchen, dropping my keys on the counter. The house was quiet, exactly how I left it. On the dining table sat a thick, cream-colored folder labeled Sarah and David's Wedding. Inside were the venue receipts, the catering menus, and the bank statements for the joint checking account I had opened for her. For the last 3 years, I had quietly funded Sarah's lifestyle. I paid for her car, covered the utility bills for her luxury apartment, and deposited a generous amount every month into that joint account so she could save for her future. Instead, she had used it to impress David's wealthy family, buying designer bags and hosting lavish dinners. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated the dark kitchen. I logged into my banking portal. For years, I had justified her behavior. I told myself she just wanted to fit in, that she was trying to build a life. But tonight, she hadn't just moved my chair. She had shown me exactly where I stood in her life, underneath the polished shoes of her new family. My cursor hovered over the joint account settings. With a few simple keystrokes, I transferred the entire balance, my hard-earned money from early mornings at the bakery, back into my personal savings. The joint account balance dropped to 0. Next, I opened the credit card portal. Sarah was an authorized user on my premium card, the one she used to book the $15,000 wedding venue deposit just last week. I clicked Remove Authorized User. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. The house felt lighter. It took exactly 4 minutes to remove her access to my money, but I knew it would take her a lifetime to understand why. Morning came with the soft gray light typical of October. I woke up at 5:00 a.m., my usual time, and brewed a pot of strong black coffee. I felt rested. There was no lingering anger in my chest, just a calm, mechanical focus. Before heading to my bakery, I sat back down at the kitchen island with my tablet. Unlinking her from my bank was only the first step. Sarah's life was tied to mine in dozens of invisible strings, and it was time to cut every single one. I logged into my cell phone provider's website. Sarah's phone had been on my family plan since she was a teenager. I selected her number, clicked Separate Account, and opted out of paying her next billing cycle. Then I moved to the utility companies. The electricity, water, and high-speed internet for her apartment were all registered in my name, automatically deducted from my checking account each month. I filled out the online forms to transfer the services entirely into her name, effective immediately. If she didn't set up her own payment methods by the end of the week, the lights would simply go out. Finally, I pulled up the contract for the wedding venue. I had signed as the primary sponsor using my business credit line as a guarantee. I drafted a polite, concise email to the event coordinator. Dear Claire, I am withdrawing my financial guarantee for Sarah Mill's wedding effective immediately. Please contact the bride directly for a new payment method for the remaining balance. Best, Patricia. I pressed send. No lawyers, no dramatic declarations, just practical, everyday administration of my own assets. I washed my coffee mug, grabbed my apron, and headed out the door to go to work. I unlocked the bakery at 6:00 a.m., the smell of yeast and vanilla greeting me like old friends. I started kneading the dough for the morning croissants, humming quietly to the radio. The sun was just starting to rise. Soon, Sarah would be waking up, too. And her day was going to look very different from mine. The bakery was bustling by 10:00 a.m. I was at the front counter handing a box of cinnamon rolls to a regular customer when my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I ignored it. It vibrated again and again. When the morning rush finally slowed, I wiped my hands on a towel and pulled the phone out. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. 47 missed calls, 32 from Sarah, 10 from David, and 5 from Eleanor. I opened my text messages. They read like a descending staircase of panic. 9:15 a.m. Sarah, Mom. Why is my card declining at the bridal boutique? Call me. 9:30 a.m. Sarah, Mom, seriously, the bank says the joint account is empty. Did you get hacked? 10:03 a.m. Sarah. The venue just emailed me. What did you do? Mom, answer the phone. 10:15 a.m. David, Patricia, we need to talk. This is highly inappropriate. I smiled slightly, tossing the phone onto the back counter. I went back to frosting a batch of cupcakes. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. It was Martha, my neighbor and close friend, who happened to work at the bridal boutique where Sarah was supposed to be doing her final fitting. Patricia, Martha whispered into the receiver. It's chaos over here. Sarah's card declined for the final dress payment. She tried 2 different cards. Then she asked David to pay, and he looked like he swallowed a lemon. They are arguing in the lobby. Are they? I arranged a strawberry on top of a cupcake. She keeps saying there must be a mistake with your bank. What did you do? Martha sounded delighted. I just stopped paying for my own disrespect, Martha. I replied smoothly. If they want the dress, David's family can cover it. They have the right standard for it after all. I hung up feeling completely unbothered. I wiped flour from my hands and looked at the clock. It was only a matter of time before she showed up here. I decided to make myself a fresh cup of tea. Let them panic. The bell above the bakery door chimed violently at 2:07 p.m. Sarah marched in her face flushed red, clutching her designer handbag like a weapon. David trailed closely behind her, looking deeply uncomfortable. The shop was mostly empty, just a few people sipping coffee in the corner. I stood behind the pastry case, calmly wiping the glass display. Mom, what is going on? Sarah demanded, slamming her hands on the counter. My cards are dead. The venue is threatening to cancel our date. Did you lose your mind? I looked up, making eye contact with her. Hello, Sarah. Hello, David. Don't act like nothing happened, she hissed, stepping closer. You emptied the account. You canceled the venue guarantee. Eleanor is furious she had to pay for my dress today. That sounds appropriate. I folded the cleaning cloth neatly. Since Eleanor is the guest of honor, and the seat of honor belongs to her, she should naturally handle the honors of paying for the event. David cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. Patricia, this is extremely petty. You fell at the dinner, it was an accident. Ruining the wedding over a misunderstanding is childish. An accident. I looked directly at David, my voice low and steady. She pushed me out of my chair, in front of 50 people, because my presence wasn't elegant enough for your mother. Sarah crossed her arms, her eyes darting nervously. I barely touched you. You just lost your balance. You're embarrassing me right now. I'm not embarrassing you. I handed a fresh pastry to the barista to put in the display. I am simply stepping back. You wanted independence from my image, Sarah. Now you have independence from my wallet. It's a package deal. You can't do this, she yelled. I don't have the cash to cover the venue. Then you should scale down, I suggested calmly. Or ask your new family. My financial support ended when I hit the floor last night. Sarah glared at me, her chest heaving. If you do this, you are not coming to my wedding. I know, I smiled politely. I wouldn't have a place to sit anyway. 2 days passed. I didn't reach out, and I blocked David's number to stop his endless texts about family duty. I kept my routine. I baked, I read my books on the porch, and I slept peacefully through the night. On Thursday afternoon, I was auditing the bakery's inventory when an email notification popped up on my phone. It was a confirmation from the utility company, transfer of service, complete. An hour later, Sarah called. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, the Wi-Fi in my apartment just shut off, she snapped, skipping any greeting. And I got a mail from the building management saying the electricity account is closed. Fix it. I have a Zoom meeting for work in 20 minutes. I didn't close them, I replied, checking off a box of flour on my clipboard. I transferred them to your name. You just need to log in, put your credit card on file, and turn them back on. There was a heavy silence on the line. Put my card on file, Mom. The electric bill here is like $300 a month. I can't afford that right now, with the wedding bills piling up. You live in a luxury condo, Sarah. The utilities reflect that. But you own the condo. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. I am helping you. I walked into the stockroom. I'm letting you live in a property I own without charging you rent. Paying for your own lights and internet is the bare minimum of being an adult. David's parents are laughing at us. Her voice cracked, the reality finally setting in. His mom asked why my family is suddenly bankrupt. Tell her the truth, I advised. Tell her your mother decided to spend her money on herself. Good luck with your meeting, Sarah. I ended the call. For years, I had built a cushion so thick around her that she never felt the hard edges of the real world. I thought I was being a good mother, but all I had done was teach her that my sacrifices were her entitlements. No more. By 5 p.m., the Wi-Fi would stay dark and the power bill would be her problem. Welcome to adulthood. Saturday morning, I was kneeling in my front garden pruning the hydrangeas. The air was cool, the neighborhood quiet. A sleek black Mercedes pulled into my driveway, the tires crunching against the gravel. The driver's door opened, and Eleanor stepped out. She wore a tailored beige suit and oversized sunglasses, looking entirely out of place on my modest suburban street. I didn't stand up. I snipped a dead leaf with my gardening shears and waited for her to approach. Patricia, she greeted, stopping at the edge of the grass to protect her heels. We need to have a conversation. Good morning, Eleanor. Nice of you to visit. I placed the shears in my basket and finally stood dusting off my jeans. I didn't invite her inside. Eleanor took off her sunglasses, her eyes sharp and calculating. I'll get straight to the point. The wedding planner called me. You pulled your funding. David and Sarah are in a panic, and quite frankly, it reflects poorly on everyone. I assume you're having some sort of emotional episode, but it's time to act like an adult and reinstate the payments. I leaned against the wooden porch railing. There's no episode, Eleanor. It's very simple. I am no longer paying. She scoffed, crossing her arms. You are ruining your daughter's future over a petty misunderstanding. We come from a different standard, Patricia. In our circles, families support their children's milestones. Then I suggest your family supports this one, I replied smoothly. If your standard is so high, a $50,000 wedding should be pocket change for you. Her fake smile dropped. The muscles in her jaw tightened. David is my son. It is tradition for the bride's family to pay. And it's tradition for the bride's mother to have a seat at the table. I countered, my voice completely flat. Since Sarah gave my seat to you, she gave you my financial responsibilities as well. You wanted to be the matriarch of the evening. Congratulations. The bill is in the mail. Eleanor stared at me, her face flushing with anger. She realized I wasn't a doormat she could step on, but a wall she had just crashed into. She turned around, got back into her Mercedes, and sped away. The following week, the illusion Sarah had built began to collapse under its own weight. I heard the details mostly through Martha, who had eyes and ears all over town. Without my credit cards and checking account, Sarah couldn't keep up the facade. David's family, despite their outward wealth, refused to step in and cover the venue. Eleanor had explicitly told David that if Sarah's family was unstable, they needed to rethink the financial arrangements. The real breaking point wasn't the wedding, though. It was the lifestyle. David was used to Sarah treating him to expensive dinners, buying premium tickets, and effortlessly managing their social life, all funded by me. When Sarah asked David to help pay her utility bills at the condo, the argument started. On a rainy Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Sarah. David packed a bag and went to his parents' house. He says we need a break. Are you happy now? You ruined everything. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel triumph, but I didn't feel guilt either. I typed a brief response. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for the illusion. Take care of yourself, Sarah. I put the phone away and went back to making dinner. A year ago, a text like that would have sent me rushing to her apartment with a checkbook and a shoulder to cry on. I would have blamed myself for not doing enough. But sitting in my quiet kitchen, listening to the rain against the window, I realized something profound. The respect David and his family had for Sarah was entirely conditional, bought and paid for by my money. The moment the money vanished, so did their affection. She wanted me to swoop in and save her like I always did. She wanted the Bank of Mom to reopen its doors and fix the mess. But those doors were permanently closed. She had to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, even if it meant falling down first. 3 days later, the doorbell rang just after 8:00 p.m. Sarah stood on the porch. She looked exhausted. Her designer coat was wrinkled and the arrogant spark in her eyes was completely gone. The wedding is off, she whispered as she stepped into the living room and sank onto the sofa. David's mother convinced him I was a liability. He told me I lied to him about my finances. I went to the kitchen, poured a cup of hot chamomile tea, and set it gently on the coffee table in front of her. Drink this. She wrapped her trembling hands around the mug. I thought you'd come fix it. I thought, when things got bad, you would step in. Why didn't you? I sat in the armchair opposite her, keeping my posture straight. Because you are 26 years old, Sarah. You chose to humiliate the woman who built your life just to impress a woman who only cared about your money. I couldn't fix that for you. You had to see it for yourself. She looked at me, her face pale. She was waiting for me to lean forward to wrap my arms around her, to tell her she could move back home, and everything would be okay. She was waiting for a hug that wasn't coming. I stayed in my chair. I loved my daughter, but I would never again let her use my love as a rug to wipe her feet on. The silence between us was heavy, but it was necessary. 6 months passed. The biting winter faded into a mild, bright spring. My bakery had its best quarter in 5 years. With the money I wasn't funneling into Sarah's bank account, I finally hired a full-time manager. I even renovated my own kitchen, replacing the old counters with beautiful white quartz, paid in cash from the refunded wedding deposits. Sarah still lived in the condo, but the arrangement had changed. We signed a standard lease. She paid me market rate rent on the first of every month and started working overtime at her firm to cover her own bills. We didn't talk every day anymore. The dynamic had shifted permanently, but she was finally acting like an adult. One Sunday morning, Martha came over for coffee. We sat on the back patio, admiring the blooming hydrangeas. "I saw Sarah downtown yesterday," Martha mentioned casually. She looked grounded, less flashy. She actually stopped and asked how my husband was doing. "She's learning," I smiled, leaning back in my wicker chair. "It takes time to build your own spine." "Do you ever miss how it used to be?" Martha asked gently. I looked out over my garden. I thought about the heavy centerpieces I used to carry and the constant anxiety of trying to fund an illusion for people who didn't matter. "No," I answered honestly. "I don't." I took a deep breath of the morning air. I had lost a seat at an engagement dinner, but I had finally found my place in my own life. And nobody was ever going to tell me to get up again.